It's May 25th. This garden is probably the most haphazard. Some things worked, some didn't. I basically just hacked the ground underneath these trees and loosened things up. There's still a lot of roots and other things, but have a little path going through. There's some claytonia. I tucked some dwarf tomatoes back there because I didn't have anywhere else to put them, so we'll see if that pans out. A lot of cold crops. Most of this was planted in mid-April, as soon as things thawed out. Some of the ground in the back here was actually still frozen underneath, but I have things like collard greens, mosh, this is tatsoi, there's kale, cabbages, some broccoli, arugula. The bok choys have done pretty well. And there's definitely differences in fertility in the ground. I added a bit of synthetic fertilizer. But these are starting to bolt now that it's getting close to June and we've had a couple of warm days. So then going through here, I dug 2 rows out here by some raspberries in just a spot that gets a couple hours of sun. It may or may not be enough for the things I've planted, but I put some different onions and leeks in here, as well as a couple extra collard greens, kohlrabi, and kale right there. And then this row is all potatoes with a couple things tucked in, a tomato plant that didn't have a home, a sunflower without a home. So I have a lot of low tunnels and then 2 different high tunnels. Out here some lettuce and bok choy, some collard greens, arugula, some stuff that could handle the cold that I planted in mid-April. Back here we have some sunflowers, started early indoors, cabbages, some flowers, cosmos and zinnia, started indoors. Under here is parsnips, just trying to help them germinate. A little bit of warmth, a little bit of moisture. Under this high tunnel, or low tunnel, there are tomatoes, kind of an experiment to have indeterminate tomatoes outdoors here in Alaska, see how they do. I have several indoors as well, which I have higher hopes for. In the back are a couple determinates. I tucked in some collard greens and some broccoli, and then in the center are carrots, and in the back parsnips. And then I tucked some peas along the edges. So a lot of different kind of see how it works experimenting going on. Under this low tunnel, I've got more seeds germinating under there, carrots, turnips, some beets, some lettuces, and stuff like that. And then I have 1 tomato plant in the far back, some mixed herbs, a couple flowers I tucked in here, and then I actually put potatoes and peas along this exposed edge. A couple of beds of strawberries and tons of container plants. Those are ever-bearing strawberries starting to flower. Here are June-bearing strawberries, and then this will be a strawberry bed next year. But for this year, it has squash and broccoli, nasturtium tucked in the back. And then pots of things that are still waiting to find homes. Bleeding hearts, peony, roots, herbs and stuff started early indoors. Some flowers in pots. May or may not live their lives in these containers. We'll see. Some peas started early in the greenhouse. Took a long time, really, to get to this point. I'm not sure if I'll start them in the greenhouse or just start them indoors from now on. Quick before we go inside the greenhouses, one reason I don't think I'll start them outdoors is because these were started quite a bit later indoors and are looking a lot better. Some spinach starting to go to seed. I personally haven't had great luck with spinach. I don't know. I'm sure it's me. I tucked some onions in there. That was one of the failures of this year. I transplanted them into different containers and I did it poorly and most of them died, but I'm planning on using these as spring onions, green onions, so hopefully some of them spring back. I have a couple of Swiss chard plants tucked in here. A lot of things I started and didn't have homes for at the time, so they got, mistreated, I suppose. I tucked some potatoes on this side of this bed and some celery. Peas are all along the edges, and then I tucked a white pumpkin in there. A couple of cabbages started probably earlier than I needed. This is my first year actually growing flowers. I've never enjoyed them much compared to productive vegetables, and I really enjoy them. When I grew it myself, something about it is so much more enjoyable. This is the first little greenhouse, high tunnel, whatever you want to call it, that I made. I made it out of repurposed chain link top rail. There was a chain link dog run when we moved in that we didn't want, and so I made this out of it. I have a lot of things going on in here. This is where I had plant starts this spring, hardening them off and such. And then I was going to make beds, but ended up going with containers for in here. I have a sun gold and a sweet million tomato that I started really early. It was one of the first things I planted in a container in here. Some Casper eggplant, some Jimmy Nardello peppers. These are peach pits from grocery store peaches, and yeah, I started them. I just threw them in the refrigerator. A couple months later, they start germinating, and threw them in soil, and this is what we have. I have a couple examples of that, but this is a dwarf Arctic rose tomato. These are Casper eggplant, a pineapple tomatillo, some mixed hot peppers, jalapeno, serrano, and habanero. These are habanero and then some purple serranos. Kind of stunted, not sure, but there's a flower there. We'll see if we get anything. Some Black Beauty eggplant. This is a larger Casper eggplant. California Wonder bell peppers. I sold a lot of those this spring and had extras for myself. So this is an experiment I'm most interested in. I have sweet potato slips tucked in all over the garden and in the high tunnels, and I don't know. We'll see if I get anything. This is a ground cherry husk tomato. I've heard a lot of things, a lot of names of them. It's my first year growing that. A variety of tomatillo, another dwarf tomato, which is lemon ice. And then I have determinate tomatoes, which some of which were chosen because they should grow well in Alaska. Italian Roma. This one's Manitoba. This is actually a heatless habanero. It's a habanada. That's what it's called. More Manitoba. These are San Marzanos. This is Subarctic Plenty, one specifically chosen for Alaska. And Early Cascade, another specifically chosen for Alaska. Back here are things I started way early indoors. Obviously corn with no ears, kind of silly, but I wanted to see how fast it will grow and when I should start transplants for the spring. And I actually have tomatoes ripening from various containers, and I grew them indoors since basically the end of December. A couple flowers, those were purchased at a greenhouse. These are ones I'm starting, but they're getting leggy. And then small containers of dwarf tomatoes. That will live up on this shelf, which, just like the greenhouse, I made out of cannibalized chain link fence components. It was actually a gate that I cut in half. And then this I put together this spring. Its peak is 9 feet tall, and it has 3 rows, approximately 3 feet wide. Very excited to see how this grows. I guess we'll start on this end. I have tomatillos over the top of husk cherries or ground cherries. I'm hoping I'll be able to trellis the tomatillos on that. We'll see how it goes. And then tons of peppers. They might be too close. They might not. It also might make a difference that each of these little rows, I have 2 rows of each variety, and differences in growth pattern by the end of the season may cause some to shadow the others. I don't know. We'll see. But I have a bunch of varieties. Some heirloom, some not. Some hot peppers, some sweet. Like I said, they might be a little close in some cases, but from what I've read, peppers like to hold hands, so we'll see. A couple of white eggplant, and the first of the sweet potatoes. This is a purple-skinned, white-fleshed sweet potato. I tucked the sweet potatoes in between double rows, mostly. So, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. The center row is all tomatoes. And in the center are sweet potatoes. I've got a bunch of varieties. I had trouble getting soil to finish filling all this, and so I would have planted things a little bit differently, same varieties next to each other, but I ended up planting half and then the other half. So I have yellow pear, red pear, Cherokee purple, Kellogg's breakfast, green giant, which I don't know if that'll have time to ripen here, but I wanted to try it, so we'll see. Mortgage lifter. What else? I have black prince. I've got indigo blueberries. I've got dances with Smurfs. I have a lot. It might be worth sitting down and looking through the seeds instead of trying to list them all off here. But lots of varieties, a couple redundancies. I really like Sun Gold and Sweet Million are supposed to be very prolific, so I tucked in a few more of those. A lot of them just have one plant of each variety of tomato. So, I don't know. Lots of learning this year, I think. That plant doesn't look too great, but I do have extras if it dies. I tucked some basil in the front of cucumbers. I have pickling cucumbers, straight 8 slicing cucumbers. Couldn't help myself, and I tucked in some more Jimmy Nardello peppers in front, and some sweet potatoes. This row, so in the tomatoes, the sweet potatoes are purple skinned and purple flesh. Very sweet, and I really liked them. All of these were just sweet potatoes from the organic section of, you know, kind of a organic type grocery store. So no sprays. I did try and start some from the regular section, and they must have sprays on them because they didn't sprout at all, or set slips. I have some watermelon. Again, not sure if it'll have time to ripen, but certainly the high tunnel or greenhouse will help. I have bucktail mountain. I keep wanting to call it blacktail because we have blacktail deer in Alaska, so I might call it blacktail mountain in the future. But one variety watermelon, and then sugar baby, another variety. I have some cantaloupe. Same deal. Not sure if they'll have time to ripen, but give it a try. Why not? A couple more tomatoes tucked in. And then Malabar spinach. This is what I'm most excited for. A lot of work went into that whole area this spring. There were 3 trees right here that I had to dig the stumps out of. A lot of thinking and design, and a 1/2-inch EMT to hold the trellis strings, and then the main center line is made out of chain link top rail. Really excited about this. Hopefully it'll have the most transformation during the summer. Here are the other trees that I've started from store-bought seeds. You know, they probably won't make it. They probably won't fruit, but it's fun to watch them grow for a little while. And I have the space, so there they are. Okay, right along our driveway, I have 2 more low tunnels covering 3 beds. Squash should be able to grow on unbroken down compost, so I planted them all in here and gave them a little low tunnel to try and protect them a bit. We're in kind of a cold snap, cold and rainy, so. And then I have sweet potatoes tucked in. Least likelihood of producing anything, but who knows. A couple of sunflowers, but mostly varieties of squash, summer and winter squash. About 20-foot rows, again covered by bent 1/2-inch EMT and greenhouse plastic. Squash again, same as the others, but I did put my corn starts in the center here. I don't have high hopes for those because they're on such, you know, unbroken down compost. But I didn't have other bed space for them, so good luck.